So this social media crackdown is basically against everything that's anti-establishment. There's a mainstream narrative on the right, and thanks to Donald Trump, that narrative has pushed so far to the right that now extremely far-right ideas are now becoming mainstream. And I could go down a list of that, but I'm not going to do it here. But the fact of the matter is that the left wing is under assault on social media platforms as well. And as somebody who basically falls in the political spectrum as center-left, libertarian left, I'm conservative on some issues, like I'm pro-gun. There's various issues that I'm conservative on. But then I'm socially liberal. I believe in social programs. I believe in universal health care, stuff like that. So you would think that I would be ideologically perfectly aligned with somebody like Tim Pool. You think that, I would listen to this podcast and hear him and be like, man, he's right on the money. He's been nailing it this whole time. Not even remotely. Not even kind of close. He is a joke. Period. End of story. And I'm going to respond to various aspects of things that he said on this podcast, probably more so in clip form. I happened to catch this live and I waited for the full video to drop before I did the review on it. I did not want to sit through this and find it. Luckily, I came close to it and was able to pull it up. So I'm going to play this clip and then I'm going to explain to you why Tim Pool is a fraud. And his entire appearance on this Jack Dorsey podcast was a disgrace. I would have rather had Sargon of Akkad on this. I would have rather had Jimmy Dore. Like, if you wanted somebody from the left, I would have rather had Jimmy Dore on this. Jimmy Dore would have been a great person to have on. He just made another good video about the social media platforms banning people who are going against the establishment wave. And he's framing it properly. See, he defends Alex Jones. He defends Milo Yiannopoulos. But then he also talks about the fact that Facebook purged thousands of left-wing pages when they were doing their fake news thing. Of course, Twitter accused Jimmy Dore of being a Russian agent. I don't even use Twitter. But I have an account and I've retweeted some things like 5 years ago. This isn't a joke. The last time I logged into it, 2 years ago, or a year ago, whenever they did this, I had a message talking about I was suspected of being a Russian bot. Okay, and I don't post right-wing stuff. This new right-wing, this Fox News right-wing, this Trump right, I'm so against that, it's ridiculous. I'm against the Hillary Clinton establishment left. I'm against all of this stuff. And anybody who falls into that category of somebody who's smart enough to see through what the Silicon Valley and DC wants to push down our throats, anybody who sees through that is being targeted. Period. End of story. But let's see what Temple... And by the way, what he's about to say has been his entire premise throughout this entire 3 hours. Okay, so this is at the 3:18 mark. Anybody who wants to watch it. I'm not taking this out of context. Again, he walked in with this premise. He was going to talk to him. He was going to talk down to him. He wasn't going to listen to what they had to say, which I had no problem with anyone doing that. The people I named, Sargon of Akkad and Jimmy Dore, they would have done a similar thing. But I actually think that those two, well, maybe not Jimmy Dore, but I think Sargon of Akkad would have listened better. And I think that he would have had more understanding than Tim Pool did. Tim Pool wants no understanding here. Tim Pool wanted to come on this podcast so that he could showboat to his following, so that he could grandstand, so that he could virtue signal to the oppressed, the self-victimized right wing online. So let's hear what he has to say, and then I'm going to completely obliterate this point that he makes.
There's going to be things that even if you segment your advertisers from, look, I pointed out, I think the Democrats are in a really dangerous position because outrage culture, although it exists in all factions, is predominantly on one faction. And so when Trump comes out and says something really offensive, grab him by the, you know what I'm talking about.
Understand the framing. When Trump comes out and says, here's the problem. They go along with everything Trump says. So if Trump says something egregious, they go along with it. Just at CPAC, just at the convention. Donald Trump was swearing. He was saying bullshit on stage. Everyone knows that he called African countries shithole countries. Everybody knows this. He did campaign rallies where he used the F word, the S word. He used a lot of profane language. Okay? When he does it, they do not care. When that Muslim woman said, impeach the motherfucker on stage, they blew their lid, and Donald Trump said she was a disgrace and everything else, and all the other far right, like, look at this language, what a disgrace. We don't need our dignified Congress people using such foul language. The outrage culture is equal on both ends. But what they both do is they excuse it. Well, really, the left doesn't excuse it on their end. They're much more ridiculous with theirs. But with the right wing, they're just as outraged at anything a Muslim or a liberal or Bernie Sanders supporter or anybody like that. They're just as outraged about that stuff as any social justice warrior in America. But the problem is that when Trump does something, or a right-winger, Steven Crowder says something, whoever, they don't care. They go along with that. They're fine with that. So using Trump as the example is a fail already.
Trump supporters laugh. They bought t-shirts that said it. The people on the left, the Democrat types, they got angry. So what happens now? You see Bernie Sanders, he's being dragged. The media is looking for blood, and they're desperate. They're laying people off, they're dying, and they will do whatever it takes to get those clicks. What does
that have to do with Twitter, though?
It has to do with the fact that someone's going to find something on your platform, and they're going to call up your advertiser and say, look what Twitter's doing. And you're going to be like, oh, we had no idea. And they're too bad. Canceled all ads. Your money's dried up. And so the reason I bring that up is I recognize...
Okay, so ridiculous point. But it's fine. I shouldn't say ridiculous point. It's an okay point. His entire goal on here, and this was his last appearance on Joe Rogan too. He frames everything from the left is outrageous, the left is violent, the left is bitter, the left is social justice warriors, everything else. Oh, and the right, they just brush everything off. So he pointed out that they bought t-shirts of that, right? Do you know, at the time that you recorded this podcast, that Donald Trump had asked Ilhan Omar to step down because of a tweet she made where she said all about the Benjamins? And then she pointed out it was Money in Politics and AIPAC, who she's referring to, not Jewish people themselves, and they're still calling her anti-Semitic. Ben Shapiro, right-winger, outrage artist. Okay. You're telling me that Fox News, the channel that everything derives from, the channel that Breitbart, InfoWars, all this stuff derived from now, wasn't always. InfoWars used to be different than Fox News, but now they're basically the same network, okay? You do realize that their entire shtick, what's made them tens of millions, if not billions of dollars, has been the fact that they push an outrage narrative to old people. That all the emphasis on college campuses and all the emphasis on something a congressperson said and Walmart telling their greeters to say happy holidays as being an attack on Christians and Christian values and the Christian culture. That immigration from Mexico is an attack on white people and persecution of white people. That a rise in minority populations is oppression and genocide to white people. That while Black Lives Matter is an outrage movement, the opposition to them is also an outrage movement. In a culture of outrage. See, the thing about Twitter, right-wing Twitter, left-wing Twitter, black Twitter, Asian Twitter, everyone's Twitter circle, they all have one thing in common. They all are a part of what is known as the outrage culture. So the people who don't fall in line with the outrage culture are people who troll those people. People who have their own lives, don't care about any of this stuff, and to the effect that they do care, they only care about the things that immediately impact them, right? And immediately impact their lives. But they're not going to be outraged because of something somebody said at the Oscars. What was the response to, because he talked about the grab by the pussy thing. Like, oh, they just laughed about it. Okay, what was the response to the guy from Stranger Things' speech at the SAG Awards? Was that like, whatever, who cares, brush that off? More snowflakerism. Sure, maybe a couple of people had that response, but there was outrage all over the 24-hour news cycle on Fox News about it. They were outraged by it. The Colin Kaepernick situation is the best example of this. Yeah, he should be out of the league, and you should make the motherfucker stand up. Respect the country. You should be forced to. If you don't want to stand for the national anthem, you should get out of the country. You're telling me there was not outrage over Colin Kaepernick kneeling for the national anthem from the right? So, he prefaced it by saying there's outrage, in every segment, but the real outrage, right? The real problem is when a left-wing person is outraged. So the Kaepernick outrage, the outrage over Christmas, there's a million examples of this. The outrage over the fact that there's 2 Muslim congresswomen. The outrage over Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. All this outrage, the outrage over Bernie Sanders, all that stuff, that's not really outrage, because all the outrage is actually just from the liberals. So he mentioned Bernie Sanders, but he didn't go into detail. What he's talking about is the New York Times story trying to bury him. And basically, he should just brush it off and keep going the way that Trump did. That's the way you defeat the outrage culture. Donald Trump laid out the blueprint. Just don't let it affect you. Act like it's not there. Just ignore it. By the way, he's not the only person who has implemented that strategy. That's happened for a lot of people. I've made the argument for a very long time that the reason Louis C.K. is gone is because Louis C.K. chose to leave. If that story had come out, and Louis C.K. came out and said, look, I did it, but they were all consenting parties. They all said they were consenting parties. You're not going to find anybody say that it was not consensual. And, I'm sorry I did it. I don't do it anymore, but it was something that I did do, and I can't take it back, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. So, sorry. There's my apology, but I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to go away because of something I did 10, 20 years ago. Period, end of story. The reason that R. Kelly was able to, go along now, of course, because of a stupid TV show, he's being raked under the coals, and don't even get me started on how ridiculous it is that TMZ was running stories on this guy a year ago about him having some girl captive, and then you see her shopping in Beverly Hills, and then Lifetime makes a special on it, and then all of a sudden he's being indicted in Chicago. It's kind of outrageous, right? But how was he able to, because Piss on You, that was 2003. How was he able to have that sex tape come out, go to the trial, and continue to have a successful career? How was he able to do this? He was able to do it because I'm not doing that, and totally ignore the backlash and totally ignore everything. Ignore it, move on as if that's not happening. The reason Donald Trump has been able to be bulletproof is the fact that he can do no wrong in the eyes of his sycophantic supporters. Bernie Sanders is the same way. I'm going to make videos about Kyle Kulinski's devotion to Bernie Sanders at no end. Bernie Sanders is doing things, he said things that go completely against Kyle Kulinski. But Kyle just says, well, I think what Bernie means to say. He's kind of like the Christian who has a problem with something Jesus said, which they all do. All the evangelicals in America have a lot of problems with quotations that Jesus said because they go against their political ideologies. Well, I think what Jesus means is something else, right? He's like, I think Bernie Sanders, I don't think he means that the Russian thing is real, right? I think he means something else. No, he means it. He's just wrong about it. Just point out where he's wrong. But I can give him a pass because I give all the Trump supporters passes who do the exact same thing, who Trump can do no wrong. Alex Jones is a Donald Trump sycophant. He's called him out a couple of times. His audience has been furious. So he just quit doing it. He's like, well, I'm just not even going to call him out anymore. I'm just going to keep saying everything he's doing is great because that's what the people want to hear, right? And Tim Pool is in the same exact boat. He was a liberal. I'm not going to say he wasn't a liberal. I'm not going to say he wasn't a Bernie Sanders supporter. But what he realized is, wow, this gravy train's going good now. That I'm exposing right-wing deplatforming. Which, by the way, that is totally real. I'm not saying it isn't. He omits and acts like left-wing deplatforming isn't there. I wonder what he thinks, because he never mentioned this anywhere, about the treatment of promoters of BDS on Twitter and on college campuses across the country, which is another reason why Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are being attacked viciously. They haven't come out in full support. of BDS, but they've not come out in opposition to it either. And so the extremist ideologies in the country, on the left and the right, view indifference as support. If you're not against it, that means you're for it, right? Even though I have not come out in support, like, here's my thing. I like Tulsi Gabbard for president. I voted for Gary Johnson and Jill Stein, right? My politics is very fluid. Bernie Sanders, I don't like Bernie Sanders, but I'm really just indifferent to him. If he's the nominee, I'll support him. I'm just indifferent to him. So in the eyes of the far right winger, I support him because I'm indifferent to him, right? I'm actually supporting Tulsi Gabbard for president, but in the eyes of the extremist, I'm indifferent, therefore I support. And in the eyes of the far left winger, when Donald Trump was running for president, I'm like, I don't really support him, but I'm kind of indifferent to him. I do like some of the stuff he's saying. That is a show of support to the extremist. And when you have an audience that's built up the way that Alex Jones is, the way that Tim Pool's is, the way Dave Rubin's is, the way a lot of these guys' audiences are built, they recognize in comments, in thumbs up and thumbs down. The reason this podcast is happening was because of the backlash that Joe Rogan got over the Jack Dorsey podcast. It's a similar thing. He's like, okay, I got to do this again because I pissed a lot of people off. And then I do a podcast where I'm a lot more open and I'm saying a lot more different stuff. That way I can kind of get the audience back. That's what all these guys do. They make a video and they say something that pisses off their audience. Like the audience of Tim Pool is the same kind of audience that what's his name, Jesse Lee Peterson has. It's that kind of audience. It's the audience that, look, here's this Bernie Sanders supporter who's saying all the outrage is on the left and that none of it's coming from the right. That's the guy I like. So if he starts pointing out Ben Shapiro's outrage on a video, he's going to get a lot of backlash for that. Right? Ben Shapiro calling everybody an anti-Semite. If he starts pointing that out and he starts making videos about that, he's going to lose a lot of supporters. So the way that you avoid that is you just don't talk about that. And you just talk about what the audience wants to hear. Because he does not have an audience of like left-wing people. Any left-wing person in his audience is somebody who's very sympathetic and empathetic to the right like he is. Now here's the thing. I have no patience for the far right. And the way that the right wing has moved in this country is the mainstream right is the far right. And he actually points this out a lot. He actually points this out a lot in this podcast. He says, well, it's just right-wing ideology to call somebody who's transgender by the race that they're not identifying with, right? So if you're born a man and now you're Susan or whatever, you know, it's like, well, no, I'm still going to call you Fred and you're still a man, right? Chelsea Manning, you just call it Bradley and call him a guy, right? That's just conservative ideology, correct? No. You don't think there's any conservatives who don't care about that? There's plenty of them. It's just not the fringes, and it's just not the people on the internet making all the videos and making all the comments. So, in his mind, well, no, the absolute extreme version, that's the mainstream. So you can't ban people for bullying transgender people because it's conservative ideology to bully transgender people. So you can't have anti-bullying because it's in Antifa's nature to bully. It's in the Pepe nature to bully, right? It's the alt-right thing to bully. So you can't ban that, right? Basically, and I'm going to finish my video with this. I said it would be good to have Jimmy Dore or Sargon of Akkad on here. And I understand what Joe Rogan was trying to do. I understand what these guys are doing. I don't like deplatforming. But let's just be honest here. And this was exposed with Alex Jones whining about his deplatforming. A few people pointed this out, and this is just true. The reason that you're hitting roadblocks with these discussions is, of all the social media out there, you want to make right-wing comments that are controversial, that go against the terms of service of the website you decided to join. So the answer to that is to not use the website. So I'll use an anecdotal story here. Take with it what you want to. It was kind of a strange thing, but I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I don't use Twitter, that I have an account, but I don't ever use it. And basically what happened to my account was I created the account in 2016. I was using it. I was making some comments and various statements on there. And I had gotten into a discussion with a radical right-wing person who kept responding back to me libtard and everything else. I was calmly responding, but I was getting back a lot of rage and a lot of, just outrage over the fact. And I was saying like the moderate position on something that was going on, and they were giving me the far right perspective. And it was fine, but they were angry and they were using all caps and doing everything else. So towards the end, I was like, okay, well, I'm done with this. I don't really know what else to say. Your mind's not going to be changed at all. And the person was like, all right, I got to block you, libtard. Sorry, but I have no patience for this low IQ, whatever their talking points are. So they then supposedly blocked me or whatever. I get off. A couple days later, I get back on there. I look at what's trending, and I start trying to tweet. And my tweets aren't working. So I was on my phone, I got on the computer, and I was suspended from tweeting because of flags. My account had gotten flagged. And the tweets that I had made weren't there anymore. They'd all been flagged as inappropriate, okay? So basically, I was unable to tweet because I had offended some conservatives by, I don't know, just not having the far right-wing fringe conservative talking point. And I didn't fight it or anything because I didn't care. I was just like, well, I'm not going to use this platform if somebody can just flag me, right? I'm a little user. I don't really have any followers or anything because I'm not really trying to use the platform. And I can just get my account suspended so easy. That's ridiculous. And I know people who've had this happen with Facebook, right? They'll be in a discussion, somebody just blocks them, or somebody flags the stuff they're putting up as inappropriate or as porn, and it isn't porn. They just don't like what it says. But the thing of it is, Alex Jones was talking about, this is all about free speech. You can't deplatform me because these should be public, even though they're privately owned companies. But on his private forum on Infowars.com, they block people who go on there and say stuff they don't like. Right? They reserve the right to ban you if you go against their terms of service. And it said it on there. It was like, no, this is a dictatorship. This isn't a democracy. This is a private website and you can't say what you want to say. And it's just funny because they recognize it on their own platforms. But when it comes to Jack Dorsey's platform, they act like, well, no, you have to abide by our rules. You don't get it. So that's not a popular opinion. I know Jimmy Dore and a lot of people would be pissed off about that. But it's funny that the far-right solution to this is the left-wing thing that, these should be public utilities. That's a left-wing argument. So now you just make left-wing arguments when you're not getting your way. Like, now I'm left-wing because it is appropriate for this particular position. But healthcare, no, that's got to be private. What? No, they should be public institutions. No, they shouldn't be public institutions. You're a communist and Soviet and everything else. But private businesses, they should be ran by the government. Okay, so no principles whatsoever then, right? So, Tim Pool makes an argument in here that's ridiculous too, that I'm going to bring up before I end this, where he says, so what's going to happen is these guys are going to be unsatisfied, that they're going to go to these other platforms, and then they're going to get in their own bubbles, and they're not going to have the discourse, and you're messing up discourse and everything else. While that might be true, there are so many people not on Twitter that it doesn't matter. People who are on Twitter, see, Tim Pool's a guy who's on Twitter. He thinks Twitter is like the epicenter of anything. I don't know anybody who uses Twitter. I have hundreds of friends. I don't use Facebook. But everyone I know uses Facebook. I don't know anybody who uses Twitter. No one. And I've told a lot of my Trump supporting friends that they should get on Twitter so they can follow his Twitter. Because I'll be talking about like his tweets. Because I'll just look up his tweets on Google. But they don't even do that. They don't even know what he's saying on Twitter. They don't even follow him. Because most of them don't use Twitter. So this idea that, no, everyone's on Twitter so it should be this public utility is ridiculous in a way. But on the flip side of that, he's saying that, well, since Twitter's doing this to right-wingers, they're going to go get in their own bubble and they're not going to be able to have the discourse. There's a reason we have left-wing Twitter, black Twitter, conservative Twitter, right? There's a reason we have these things. And see, I didn't realize that I had got caught up in conservative Twitter that one time, because I didn't realize that these people were consolidated in their own bubbles on there. Basically, you go on there, you follow the certain people, you respond to the certain things, and then the website caters to you because they want you on there. So they put you in, well, here you're obviously right-wing, so here's your right-wing bubble for you to live in. Facebook does the same thing. All your recommendations are going to be right-wing things. You know, that's what these websites do anyway. So he's saying, oh no, they're going to go to this other platform, then there's going to be no discourse. Well, here's the question about the alternative platform. Will they have the right to ban anybody? Because the whole point is, you know, hey, these people shouldn't be banning anybody. You're saying if conservatives ran Twitter, that it would be this free marketplace of ideas and there would be no banning, which is absurdity. You're talking about a political ideology that, you know, because they always talk about left wing, that's all authoritarian. Well, the fact of the matter is, these people are embracing fascism, they're embracing the far right, and that's authoritarian as well, right? They always cheer on the authoritarian impulses of Trump because they agree with that. There's a great video that Right Wing Watch put up, and of course it's a clip, so according to Tim Pool, you can't look at it, but it shows it in context. It shows you him saying it, so I'm not going to sit through a 2-hour live stream, and I don't think Right Wing Watch should put up a 2-hour live stream just to show you a guy saying something that is important that you should hear. What he says is, what Richard Spencer says is, he says, well, we're using free speech right now. Basically, we're just gaming the system, right? So we're doing all this stuff under the guise of free speech, but in our utopian society that we're trying to build here and we're trying to inspire people to become a part of course free speech isn't going to be a thing. Right, because they don't actually believe in free speech. They're using free speech as the tool in order to get into the conversation, be allowed to speak, be allowed to spread their ideas, but once they get in control and then they can implement the things, they're not going to be on the side of that. Here's a great example of it. Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, all these guys. When the Republicans sued Barack Obama for violating the Constitution by using his executive power, they said that he should be impeached for it and that should be illegal and that everything should go through the Congress because the Republicans own the Congress. And the Senate, the Republicans own the Senate while Obama was president. And you know, hey, he should have to go through there, and the fact that he's using executive powers, that means he's a dictator, and he should be impeached for it, and it's wrong, and everything else. Trump becomes president, he signs record numbers of executive orders, they're cheering him on and saying, look, he signed in more law than any other president. No, he's using his executive power, the very thing, and by the way, he had the House and the Senate for the first 2 years. The very thing that they were against with Obama, now all of a sudden they're for. The thing that they called Obama a dictator for, the thing they called him an authoritarian for, the thing that they said he's not allowed to do, even though, Bush, Clinton, Reagan, all signed more executive orders than Obama, but it was, well, he's black and we don't like him, so his executive orders make him a dictator. He's got a Muslim-sounding name, so he's a dictator, right? But Trump doesn't. It's like, well, yeah, he's a dictator, but he's our dictator, so it's fine. There's no principle behind it. So just keep this in mind when we're talking about free speech and everything else. The fact that if they do get their own conservative platforms, which I'm fine with them having, by the way, I don't think that I'm going to be able to go on there and freely speak about Bernie Sanders and shit like that. Maybe they would be fine with it, right? But if they have a terms of service and I go on there and repeatedly break it, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get banned. The same way that a lot of people get banned from Twitter. That's not to say that I'm justifying these people being banned from Twitter. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I am fully on board with the outrage over social media bannings and social media framing things in the light of the way that the establishment wants you to see them, right? All the social media platforms have fully bought into the fact that by Russians having these social media accounts and having opinions, they're swaying the election, right? By you watching an RT clip, you're getting manipulated by a Russian dictator. All ridiculous, right? All silly stuff, but all the platforms have completely, fully gone along with that. So, with that, you have to understand, well, what are they saying that is Russian bots and Russian manipulating everything else? Well, Bernie Sanders supporters, Black Lives Matter supporters, a couple of the sites that Facebook banned were police watchdog groups. So like these pro Black Lives Matter, basically, you know, pro police reform pages where they would show police misconduct and stuff like that. Those got banned too. Now, those aren't right-wing pages. Those go against the narrative from the far right that everything a police officer does is good, until we talk about guns, and then they're like, well, we need the guns to be able to shoot the cops if they ever try to come take our guns. So it's all a big mess. The entire issue that I have with Tim Pool, and which will be the subject of every video that I make about this, is that he uses the right-wing framing. He's disingenuous, and he never brings up any of this stuff happening to the left. Now, I did not watch this entire podcast. Anyone out there, if he does mention this, feel free to let me know. But the bottom line is, he still said what he said there, that all the outrage culture is on the left, and the right, think about it, with Donald Trump. Stupidest point ever made. Well, Donald Trump sycophants aren't offended by the fact that he said grab him by the pussy. Okay, so if Obama had said grab him by the pussy, they would have just laughed it off and been fine and bought t-shirts. That's what you're saying? Okay, I'm going to hold you to that. All right, until next time.